started. Today we're joined by Courtney from Alpine. Courtney, why don't you give us a little introduction about yourself?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. My name is Courtney. I am a first-year analyst at Alpine Investors, which is a middle market private equity firm headquartered in San Francisco. A little bit of background about me: born and raised in Los Angeles, and went to Stanford. I studied economics and public policy and was co-president of Stanford Women in Business on campus. So very happy to be chatting with you all today.
We're so glad that you're here. We've been planning for this all winter quarter. So glad we're making it happen now. So I guess to start off, would it be possible to share with us the path you took from Stanford to Alpine?
Definitely. So I'd always been interested in business, but really had no idea what I wanted to pursue under the broad business umbrella. I was lucky enough as a freshman to join Stanford Women in Business, and through SWIB, I was exposed to all of the different sectors within business. Going back to when I was a young kid, I loved lemonade stands. I really liked numbers and talking to people, and realized that business was kind of a mixture of both of those, just with a lot more complexity, but still, you were able to kind of use numbers and also chat with people at the same time. And so I wanted to find a job that satisfied those two things. Kind of more specifically within that, I wanted to be able to use numbers to tell a story and form an opinion. But then kind of on the talking to people side of things, I wanted to work with a large group of people who had similar values to me, who all kind of shared the same set of interests, but also, shared these similar values. And so I was lucky enough to get an internship at Morgan Stanley in their technology equity capital markets division after my sophomore summer. It was a great introduction to finance and confirmed that I wanted to be in finance, but I really wanted to understand more technical modeling and have a little bit more of the opportunity to actually make decisions. In equity capital markets, you're creating materials for your clients, but you actually don't really get to make any decisions. But as a private equity investor, I get to make decisions every day about whether or not I want to invest in companies. So I heard about Alpine right before my junior year and interviewed with them. Through the interviews, found that I absolutely loved the people and the work that Alpine was doing, and was lucky enough to get an offer, intern there after my junior year, and I started full-time in September. So here I am.
Wow, that's really awesome. Congratulations.
Thank
I feel
you.
like it's always really interesting to see how the journey is to a company, because I feel like as freshmen, Mo and I have like absolutely no idea like where it's going to take us. So it's really cool to see it happen. So what got you interested in Alpine's work, and how did your classes and activities during Stanford prepare you for a career with Alpine?
Yeah, so maybe I can start on that as first of just what stood out about Alpine. I think you hear that at a lot of firms, but it especially holds true at Alpine that the people and our people first culture is what stands out to me. A perfect example of this is during my super day. It's weird to think all this stuff was in person, but my super day interview was in person. And my first interview, I thought I was going to be grilled on all these questions, and no, two analysts took me out to Phil's Coffee, and we chatted about life, and it resembled nothing like an interview. It was asking about, what did I do earlier that week? What was I excited about for this school year? Just generally asking me about what I had done at Stanford. And it was so different than the typical finance firm, and showed me that Alpine really wanted to get to know me as a person versus, could I walk them through a DCF, for example. I think also another thing that stood out about Alpine was that they kind of talk about having an A plus, summer analyst experience, and that rang completely true. I was given a ton of responsibility, and my opinions were valued. I was treated as an equal deal team member and had the opportunity to meet with CEOs, CTOs, and founders of companies, and didn't even just attend these meetings, but led portions of these meetings, built an entire financial deal model. And I think these things were something that were incredibly unique as a 21, 22-year-old in a private equity internship, and realized that that was something that really did stand out about Alpine. I believe your second part of the question was just asking about the classes and activities at Stanford, helped prepare me for a career at Alpine. As you all very well know, Stanford is a business major, and so had to join different business clubs on campus, like SWIB, to really develop my business acumen. However, I think a lot of this too was just stuff I learned on the job, right? I on a high level would read articles in the newspaper or get newsletters every morning just with some high level business topics, but I didn't know all the fancy finance terms and how to do financial modeling. Actually got into my internship. So I guess that's almost like a piece of advice too. It's that you don't need to know all this stuff before going into your internship. I do think one great thing about Stanford is kind of through your Thinking Matters classes, your power classes, and the RAISE requirements, Stanford does a very good job of teaching you to evaluate problems through different frameworks. And as an investor, you're always doing that. You're always trying to think out of the box and say, in what situation would we want to buy this company? And I think kind of through taking a huge variety of WAISE courses, I was able to really evaluate all these problems with different frameworks, which perfectly set me up for my job today.
That's awesome to hear, because it feels like right now we're just filling requirements, but it's good to know that they're going to lead to something. And I guess another general question is, what made you decide to commit to private equity?
Yeah, so for my full-time job, I told myself a few things about what I wanted to be true while committing, before I committed to a full-time job somewhere. And there were kind of 4 things that I told myself had to be true. Number 1, I wanted to be surrounded by good people. Number 2, I wanted to be consistently learning every day. Number 3, I wanted to always be, or not always, but be pushed out of my comfort zone. And number 4, be exposed to a variety of industries. And Alpine and private equity on a broader scale was able to offer all of these. And so this made me confident in my decision to start my career at Alpine.
That's awesome.
Right, that sounds so fun actually. And we were just wondering if you could take us through a few like Alpine specific responses. So the first one is, could you walk us through what you do in a day at Alpine? Yeah.
Definitely. I'm sure, as you've heard from many people, right, every day on the job is different. But if you think about the deal universe in a few different stages, we can kind of think about very early stage deals, more of deals that you're working on for companies we know we want to buy. And then when we working on a company that's our portfolio company, meaning we already own it. And I'd say I spend about 75% of my time in kind of the middle bucket there of companies that we want to buy but haven't bought yet. And so we're doing a lot of diligence on them. And then the other 25% on kind of the early stage deals and the companies we already own. So in the early stage deals, a lot of it is just kind of asking yourself very high level questions about the market, about the company, and seeing if it's something that we'd be interested in pursuing. And then kind of if answers to all of those questions are yes, we then decide, we then try to work and potentially buy the company. And there's a bunch of stages within this, but let's just assume we've signed a document today that we have an intention of buying company A, and we have 45 days to basically answer all of our diligence questions about company A. And so there's a different work streams we have within this. There's financial diligence, there's legal diligence, there's tax diligence, there's insurance diligence, there's business and operations diligence. And so just kind of think about, we're trying to get comfortable with all of these diligence questions by looking through their past financial statement, asking questions about the customer base of the company, understanding, what are potential areas for growth and how can we grow the company once we own it. And so that's where a lot of my time is spent as an analyst. And then on kind of the final bucket here is thinking about the companies that we already own. I am on board support for a few of our companies, and so that means I just go to quarterly meetings, and it's really cool to see, how the company's grown over time since we've invested in
it. Right, that sounds really interesting. And I think just related to that, we're wondering what your favorite part of the job is, and if there are like any challenges you face along the way.
Yep. Favorite part of the job is the people. Or I guess it's 2 things. First, the people, and second, the work I do. Okay. I absolutely love going to work every day, and I guess I interned at Alpine in person, so I guess it was great to be in person, but I still love going to work when it's remote. I think a great sign of this was like over the summer, all of my fellow interns and I would like go on runs and go to dinner together and then come back and work evenings versus like trying to get out of the office as quick as we can. No, we wanted to stay there and hang out with each other. And I think that was something that, really showed that I love the people at Alpine. And the second part of that is just I absolutely love the work I do. It has been so cool as, 8 months into the job to be able to lead calls with CEOs and founders who've spent decades running and growing their business. And I get to chat with them about ways to further grow the business. I think it's just awesome. I've been given so much responsibility, but I've learned so much over the last 8 months and really, really look forward to further developing kind of my framework and lens as an investor. On the challenges side of things, there's just still so much for me to learn, right? I think a perfect example of this is I was talking about earlier kind of the different diligence streams. Legal is one of those. I'll be on calls with my deal team members who are negotiating very complex terms with lawyers that I just still have not much idea about. And so this is definitely something where I know with time I'll get better at it, but there's definitely terms I'm still trying to get up to speed on, and, just try and get up the learning curve as quickly as I can.
Right. That sounds so good. And I think you've partially responded to this already, but can you just tell us what the culture at Alpine is like? And if you can summarize it in 3 words, what 3 words would that be?
Totally. So I'll answer the 3 words question first. Say collaborative, innovative, and hardworking. And, on a broader scale, what I think the culture is like, I think one example of this is one of Alpine's core values is continuous improvement. And it's really cool because on all the deals I'm on, our teams will come together with the goal of, thinking about how we can improve every single process we engage in, but also making sure that we're becoming better people, better coworkers, and better investors. And so it's great to be at a firm that actually invests in the development of me and my coworkers, not just as people in the workplace, but as individuals who have lives outside of the workplace. And I've touched on this a lot because Alpine is so focused on the people, and it's been really, really cool to be at a firm that values, as I was talking about, being collaborative, innovative, and hardworking, but also wants you to be your best self, both inside and outside the workplace.
Right. Okay. And I think students would definitely be interested in Alpine at this point. So do you have any tips on people trying to get into Alpine or finance more broadly? Yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting because I think it's Stanford, right? Stanford at a business major, I think it'd be a little bit easier or more clear cut to say I'm interested in business or investing or finance or not. But because there's no business major, I think it's almost cooler because anyone can go into finance or investing. It doesn't matter what your background is. So I'd say a big recommendation of mine is to just do what you're interested in. It doesn't matter if you are, doing research after your freshman year, work at a nonprofit after your sophomore year. But if you're able to package that up and tell it in a story, it is so okay you can work in finance. There's really in my opinion, there should be no prerequisite to work whether or not you can or cannot work in finance. I would say, though, you do need some type of quantitative skills. A lot of those you can teach yourself once you're on the job, but there's definitely still some just very high level, as we were kind of talking about earlier, thinking about evaluating problems through frameworks, making sure that you do have a little bit of a quantitative background. But I'd argue that all of you are at Stanford, you all very likely probably already have that quant background.
Right. Okay. And the last question on the Alpine specific is just what skills do you think are most relevant to students in this industry?
Yeah. I would say probably aren't just for finance, but for other industries as well. Being a good communicator, being a good team player, and making sure you can critically think and evaluate problems. So on the communication side, ask questions when you have them and provide updates to your team members, right? And I think this is something too that we can even talk about with group projects at school, right? Your team members want to see how much of your part of the essay you've wrote, or if you have questions about, hey guys, what do you think we should write for this portion? Speak up about it. No one will ever get mad at you for over communicating, and if they tell you to over communicate, that's totally fine, right? I'd rather be told I'm over communicating than under communicating. On the team player side, I would recommend kind of thinking about how you want to show up in a group setting, right? Do you want to be the person who never gets the work done? Or do you want to be kind of the leader in the group, the person who's kind of leading the charge and always aware of everything that's going on? And on the critical thinking side, think about how you can best present data, for example, right? Say you're given a huge data set and have an hour to be able to present it to the partner at the firm you're working at. Think about how you can best present it, right? Are you just going to want to forward them the Excel sheet? Probably not. You're probably going to want to put it into do a little summary tab and analyze that data. And so just really being on top of kind of critical thinking skills and trying to discern what is absolutely most important for the rest of your team members to know.
Right. Okay.
That's awesome. I think next we're going to move on to career and workplace questions, if that's okay. So the first one is, what was the transition from Stanford like for you? And do you have any tips on easing the transition from college to work?
Totally. So my transition was all remote, which was very interesting. However, I would say that the transition from college to full-time work isn't much more different than going into a summer internship, right? So I guess my thought here is, yes, it's different as, the internship's only 10 weeks, full-time work is forever. But I think this probably is a good piece of advice for starting an internship or for starting a full-time job is during the first few weeks, really try to get to know all of your coworkers. Whether that's just asking them if they want to grab a quick coffee, or you meet each other in the kitchen and you just say, hey, I'm Courtney. It's nice to meet you. I haven't seen you around, but I'm a, first-year analyst on the investing team. That goes a really long way, and you'll likely be working with them in the future. So it's just better to put a face to a name as soon as you can. Also, just kind of want to set the stage and say sometimes it can be really scary starting a full-time job and, thinking about, wow, what's the rest of my life going to be? What am I going to be doing in 5 years? So a tip would be to try to plan things outside of the workday, especially with work from home. Right now, I think it's so important to not be glued to your screen 24/7. So can you plan a walk outside? Can you plan a meal or, go pick up food somewhere? Can you schedule time to read or catch up on the news with no devices in front of you? I think it's super important to try to find some boundaries between your, work life and outside of work life.
That's so real. I feel like even as students, we have to try to strike that balance between work and personal life. Our next question is also kind of related. So do you have any tips on navigating the recruiting process? And given that most of it has transitioned to an online setting and probably will be.
Yeah, so I would recommend trying to attend as many events as you can. Even though everyone does have that Zoom fatigue, I think it's actually a great way when you're attending these events is that it's a much easier way for you to meet and network with a bunch of people versus a firm having to come to campus where they might not have money for it. They might not be able to get everyone there because someone may have had to, go travel for business meeting. With the virtual events, they're probably able to get a better showing of individuals from their firm. That then you can hopefully have better opportunities to really get those one-on-one conversations. Once you're at those events, get those people's contact information and send them thank you notes. Or not notes, emails. It is surprisingly rare actually to be at some of these events and receiving thank you emails. And so just a simple email can go a very long way. Imagine you send an email as a freshman and then you want to apply for the internship a year later. If you just follow up on that email chain and that person saw that you went to the event and sent them a thank you note, you will have some advantages, I think, in the recruiting process.
I think that's really good advice. Are there any other ways you networked or have any networking tips for us when in the recruiting process?
Definitely. And I would say first, 100% utilize the Stanford Alumni Network and just cold email everyone. I sent way too many cold emails, and looking back, I remember at the end of my senior year, I was going through my emails, I cannot believe I sent this many cold emails. The worst thing is they don't respond, right? That is to be nothing else wrong. If the worst thing is that they don't respond. However, within those cold emails, I would try to make them as specific as you can and say, hey, I saw you studied econ at Stanford, or hey, I saw, you were part of Stanford Women in Business, or you're part of this group, and find some kind of tie so that they know that you've actually done your research and realize when you want to chat with them. I would also caution against making sure you have the firm name and the industry correct. I have received emails from individuals saying, hey, I'd love to chat with you about your time at Alpine. I'm really interested in investment banking. And investment is part of finance, but we're in private equity, which is, yes, it's part of the broader finance umbrella, but where I work does not do investment banking. And so unfortunately that shows that the person was probably not doing their homework and didn't know what kind of firm Alpine was. And so, better to be safe than sorry, but in those situations too, make sure that if you are being specific, that you have all the information correct.
Totally. I feel like probably the biggest lesson I've learned from SWIB is to cold email. The seniors really emphasize it, and I think that's great.
It works. I cannot tell you how many people I know got internships through just cold emailing everyone in their network.
So true. So once you get past the recruiting stage, what advice would you give to interns during an internship?
That's a great question. I am a big proponent of asking questions. If there's something that confuses you, feel free to ask it. Of course, make sure it's the right time, and maybe you set some time aside with the person who you're working with or your manager once a week for 30 minutes to go over those questions. But make sure you don't ever ask the same question twice. That shows you're not listening. It's kind of like the first 2-3 weeks of the internship, you have full reins to ask every single question in the whole wide world. But if you're asking the exact same question 6 weeks in, they're going to be like, I spent an hour explaining this to you at the beginning of the internship? Were you not listening to me the whole time?
That's so true.
I'd also recommend trying to find ways to ask for feedback that aren't just during the midsummer and end of summer feedback session. And that can be a super simple thing, right? If you have a deliverable due on a Friday and it's due at 2 p.m. and the client meeting's on Friday, put 10 minutes on the manager's calendar on Monday and said, hey, so happy we turned this in. Do you have 10 minutes to just, is there anything that I can do better on for next process? And I think that allows you to really iterate on that feedback quicker versus, having to wait to the midsummer and having them not tell you what you did wrong, and then you don't have as much time to implement that feedback. And then finally, I'd recommend for you to go above and beyond. And I think it's sometimes hard to know what going above and beyond means, but a perfect example of this is, try to read the newspaper every day. And more times than not, there's going to be some news article that has something to do with the project you're working on. And if you just send that to your deal team or, whatever team you're on and said, hey, I saw this today, thought it was relevant to our team for X, Y, and Z reasons, they're going to sincerely appreciate that because they know that you are, trying to spend time, your free time at work or your time outside of work, like really, really making sure that you're kind of understanding everything going on with your project.
Yeah, definitely. So I think we're moving on to the second last section of our questions, and we're just wondering about your future plans. So what plans do you have for yourself over the next 3 to 5 years? Are you considering attending graduate school, and what considerations are shaping your decision? Yeah.
Definitely. So on the more professional front, I'm not sure yet, right? I'm only 6 months in and really trying to take it day by day. So far, I've really enjoyed my time at Alpine and I'm excited to become an even better investor. On the personal front, I really want to run an official half marathon. It was my goal to do one kind of like June of 2020, but of course with COVID, that didn't happen. So I just ran my own half marathons. Like I've run the 13.1, I think it's 13.12 miles. I've run whatever it is, but not officially. So I'm hoping whenever races open back up, I can have the opportunity to do that and also have the opportunity to live in a few different places. I think a cool part about, being in your young mid 20s is that, some of these firms are based in places all across the country. And for example, Alpine, I think, is going to be opening a New York office. So how can I live in a few different places in the next few years? On the business school question, or I guess if I was considering graduate school, it would be business school. I'm definitely considering attending if it's at the right time in my career. It's great though, because jobs used to require you to go to business school, and that's not the case anymore. And so I think I'd consider attending if there are any gaps in my knowledge base that I wanted to fill, or, I wanted to potentially pivot to a different industry. But so right now it's just something I'm thinking about, but in no way is that something that I think is mandatory for the progression of my career.
That's really cool. I guess concluding now, looking back, what is one piece of advice you would give to your younger self?
Yeah, I'm going to cheat and give two.
Okay.
Number one, invest into your relationships. Right, both of you are freshmen at Stanford right now. Everything's been virtual, but can you find random classmates from your power classes and Thinking Matters classes that you can get coffee with? You will be so surprised as to how small the world gets. And, you may run into someone at a business meeting. You're like, hey, we were in the same Think class and I haven't chatted with you since freshman year, but, great to see you again. And I think, that is something I wish I did a little bit of a better job with at Stanford. Was really, I came out of school with a really great core group of friends, but wish I had, was investing into relationships outside of that core group of friends, whether that be, with random professors or guest speakers at events. People will come to SWIB events, and how can you, once you're back in person, there'll be women who will come to SWIB events. How can you get their contact info and send them a quick email? Hey, I'll be in San Francisco this week. Do you have 20 minutes for coffee? They'll probably say yes if you send them a nice email and show that you're genuinely interested in getting to know them. And I think my second piece of advice is don't feel the need to follow the norm. I think for so long I had thought because I wanted to be in business, I needed to study econ or MS&E, and that's simply not the case. And I think sometimes it's better to have a different perspective and come with a different major and, a different framework to be able to evaluate problems and say, hey, I know this is, what a business major may think about it, but as a product design major, as a SimSys major, as a hum bio major, this is how I would evaluate this problem.
I think that's really good advice, especially for us as pretty undecided freshmen. Getting to know people, getting to explore courses while we can is really important. So thank you so much for your time and answering all these questions. We wish you the best of luck with your half marathon
Thank
and
you.
the rest of your time at Alpine.